The first thing he noticed wasn't her face. It was the coat. It hung on her like a memory that refused to fade, thin at the elbows, frayed at the cuffs, its color long lost to years of rain and dust. It wasn't just old, it was tired, like it had carried too many winters, too many silent battles. And in that moment, as the cold wind pushed through the crowded street, she pulled it tighter around herself, not for warmth, but for dignity. Before we go any further, take a second. If you believe in kindness and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be felt, and your support keeps them alive. She had learned long ago that people saw the coat before they saw her. It was why she kept her head down when she walked, why she avoided eye contact, why she stood a little further away in queues, as if distance could soften judgment. The world had a way of measuring people in seconds, and she never made it past the first glance. Her name was Ariba, though most people didn't ask for it anymore. Life hadn't always been this way. There had been a time when her wardrobe held colors, when laughter filled the spaces between her days. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, someone who didn't have to count coins before buying bread, someone who didn't feel the sting of whispers when she entered a room. That afternoon, she stood outside a small café, debating whether she could afford the cheapest tea on the menu. The cold had settled deep into her bones, and even the thought of warmth felt like a luxury she wasn't sure she deserved. That's when he walked in. He didn't notice her at first. He was just another man escaping the chill, brushing snow from his shoulders, stepping into the soft glow of the cafe lights. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way she hesitated at the door. Maybe it was the way her hands trembled, not dramatically, but just enough to tell a story. Or maybe it was the coat. He looked at it, really looked at it, the way no one else ever did, not with judgment, but with understanding. Ariba noticed his gaze instantly. Years of experience had made her sensitive to it. Her chest tightened, and her instinct was immediate. Leave before the rejection became visible, before the polite smiles turned into subtle avoidance, before the air around her grew uncomfortable. She stepped back, ready to disappear into the street again, because that's what always happened. People saw the coat, and they assumed everything else. She braced herself for it, the silent dismissal, the unspoken boundary. But something unexpected happened. He didn't look away, and that changed everything.
Ariba had spent years preparing herself for disappointment, but she was never prepared for kindness. It confused her. When he stepped closer, she felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the quiet panic that comes from being seen when you don't want to be. Her fingers instinctively clutched the edges of her coat, as if holding it together could somehow hold her together too. She expected a glance, maybe a polite nod at best. Instead, he opened the door wider. Not dramatically, not in a way that drew attention, just enough for her to realize it was meant for her. The warmth from inside the cafe spilled onto the cold pavement, brushing against her face like something she had forgotten existed. For a moment, she didn't move, because moments like these didn't happen to her. Not anymore. But he waited. There was no impatience in his posture, no hint of superiority, just quiet patience, like he understood that stepping forward sometimes required more courage than people realized. So she stepped in. The cafe was small but alive, filled with the soft hum of conversations and the comforting clink of cups. Ariba felt out of place immediately, like a shadow among people who belonged to the light. She chose a corner seat, hoping to shrink into it, hoping no one would notice how tightly she held herself. But he noticed. Of course he did. He didn't sit with her right away. Instead, he ordered something simple, 2 cups of tea. When he placed one in front of her, she looked up, startled. Her first instinct was to refuse, not because she didn't want it, but because she didn't know how to accept it. Kindness to her had always come with conditions, with expectations, with hidden costs she couldn't afford. But his gesture felt different. There was no pity in his eyes, no curiosity that felt invasive, just a quiet understanding that didn't demand explanation. So she accepted. And in that small, silent moment, something shifted. They didn't speak much at first. The silence wasn't awkward. It was gentle, like a pause between storms. For the first time in a long time, Ariba didn't feel like she had to prove anything. But her mind was restless. Why was he doing this? What did he see when he looked at her? Surely it was the coat. It always came back to the coat. She had worn it through every hardship, every rejection. It had become a shield, but also a label, a visible marker of everything she had lost. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't notice the way he studied her, not the coat this time, but her. He saw the exhaustion she tried to hide, the quiet strength it took just for her to be there, the way she held her cup carefully, as if even warmth could slip away if she wasn't careful. And he understood more than she realized, because he had known loss too. Not the same kind, not the same story, but enough to recognize it in someone else. The moment came quietly. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows, reminding everyone inside how fragile warmth could be. Ariba shivered slightly, even within the cafe's comfort. The coat, despite all its history, could no longer protect her from the cold. And that's when he did it. Without a word, without hesitation, he took off his own coat. It was heavier, newer, warmer, everything hers was not. For a split second she panicked. This was it, the moment she had feared. He had seen her coat, truly seen it, and now he would distance himself, maybe even suggest she needed help in a way that felt like judgment. Her heart raced as he moved closer. But instead of stepping away, he gently placed his coat around her shoulders. Not over her coat, not instead of it. Around her, like she wasn't something to be replaced, but someone to be protected. The warmth hit her instantly, but it wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something she hadn't felt in years. And in that small, silent moment, something shifted. And in that moment, she realized something that terrified her more than rejection ever had. Maybe not everyone leaves.
Ariba didn't realize she was crying until a tear slipped past her cheek and landed silently on the table. She froze. Crying was something she had trained herself not to do, not in public, not where people could see. Tears invited questions, and questions led to explanations she was too tired to give. But this wasn't the kind of crying she knew how to control. This was something breaking open inside her, not from pain, from relief. The coat around her shoulders felt heavier now, not because of its fabric, but because of what it meant. No one had ever done something like this for her without expecting something in return. No one had looked at her and chosen kindness without hesitation, and she didn't know what to do with it. The man didn't react to her tears the way others might have. He didn't panic, didn't try to fix it, didn't make her feel exposed. He simply sat there, steady and calm, as if he understood that some moments weren't meant to be interrupted. That made it easier somehow, easier to breathe, easier to exist. For the first time in years, Ariba felt seen, not for what she lacked, not for what she wore, but for who she was underneath it all. And that terrified her, because hope was dangerous. Hope meant believing that things could change, and she had learned the hard way that change didn't always come gently. But this felt different. This didn't feel like a promise. It felt like a beginning. Days turned into weeks, and something unexpected started to grow between them. Not a dramatic romance, not something loud or overwhelming, but something quiet and steady. He never tried to fix her life. He never treated her like a project. Instead, he showed up, again and again, sometimes with tea, sometimes with nothing but his presence. And slowly, Ariba began to change, not because he asked her to, but because she wanted to. She found herself standing a little straighter, speaking a little more, smiling hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. The world didn't feel as heavy as it once had, and for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by survival alone. But the coat remained. She still wore it, not because she had nothing else, but because it reminded her of where she had been, and more importantly, of the moment everything started to change. One evening, as winter began to loosen its grip, she stood outside the same café where it had all begun. The air was still cold, but it didn't bite the way it used to. He stood beside her, and this time she didn't feel small. She reached up, slowly, and removed the coat. For a moment she held it in her hands, running her fingers over its worn edges, its faded fabric. It had carried her through the hardest parts of her life. It had been her shield when she had nothing else. But she didn't need it the same way anymore. She turned to him, not as someone waiting to be judged, but as someone ready to be seen. And without fear, without hesitation, she smiled. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's entire world. Special request: before you go, comment the word warmth if you believe one small act of kindness can change a life. Because sometimes it's not about replacing what's broken. Sometimes it's about wrapping someone in warmth and reminding them they were never meant to face the cold alone.